Hello, everyone. Good day to one and all. Listen, can I tell you a secret? When you're working with technology, anything that can go wrong will go wrong. I just clicked on start the broadcast at the top of my screen on StreamYard and it goes, oh, you have an error. I've been getting errors all day for different things, all day. Oh my goodness. We are still here. I am still here. We are getting this done. How is everyone today? Please tell me where you are joining us from today. I am so happy to have you here. I am your host, Julie Turney. Welcome to Magnifying HR Voices. Each week, I meet with an amazing HR professional to talk about their career and a thought provoking topic, something that we don't ordinarily talk about as HR professionals, especially live in a global context like this. So I'm always honored to have beautiful, amazing people join the show. So today we are talking about organizational culture. Who is responsible for leading the charge with organizational culture? Is it HR? Who is it? Is it the business? Who leads the charge for HR and who ultimately is responsible for HR? This question we are going to have answered today in our robust conversation with my dear friend Karen Weeks. So I'm going to bring up Karen to the stage so that I could stop talking. Hi, Karen.
Hi,
How are you
everyone.
doing?
Good. Thank you so much for having me. And it's going to be
Oh,
okay. We're going to power through this, even with
we are
technology
definitely.
glitches.
Listen to me, technology. Listen, keep it cool. I am so happy to have you here today. I am seeing Bermuda is in the house. Hey, Bermuda. Hi, Andrea. I am seeing Madison. I am seeing California, Chicago, NYC. Barbados is in the house. Look, I'm telling you, this audience is absolutely amazing. We are going to kick off our conversation today. We're talking about culture and organizational culture and why it matters. But who's responsible? Who's responsible? Because leadership sometimes they get this totally wrong. And we as employees sometimes we get it wrong. As HR professionals, we might even get it wrong.
Yeah.
So let's have this conversation. I see Germany has joined us. Oh my goodness. I love you guys. You guys are absolutely awesome. Let's talk about this. Let's ask the question to the audience. Who's responsible for culture, people, when it comes to the organization and creating a culture? Who do you think is responsible? I'm going to jump off the screen like I normally do to give Karen the opportunity to introduce herself to you, tell you who she is, what she does, and then we're going to pick up this conversation.
Awesome. Thank you again for having me. I'm so excited to chat with all of you today. My name is Karen Weeks. I am currently the SVP of People at a company called Ordergroove. We do relationship commerce and create some really strong programs for retailers and brands to connect with their consumers on an ongoing basis, not a transactional one and done. I've been there for 5.5 years now almost, and really have grown the company from 40 people to over 100, to expanding our product, expanding our client base, really seen a lot of exciting growth. Obviously, the last year and a half has been hard as humans, but in the e-commerce space, it's been pretty good. So we feel very, very fortunate and very lucky to be where we are. I actually started my career in theater and the arts. I was going to be a stage manager. I was a stage manager for a while. Then I worked out in LA, out in Hollywood, and really struggled because that was everything I loved. But then when it had to be my livelihood, it was not the right match for me. And then I tried the business side of the arts, and that took me away from what I loved about the arts. So after a lot of reflection, I found myself in HR because I really wanted to help people with their careers and really help create an amazing experience for them while they were at work. And so this was before we actually called it culture and some of the HR terms that we use today and employee experience and all that. But that was really my goal. And so this topic is very close to my heart, whether it's been through training and development roles that I've had, or more generalist, or when I led the shared services ops team, or now as the leader of all things people ops and culture and everything above. I want to create and help create, because we'll talk about this in a second, partner with others to create an amazing place for people to come to work every day. Obviously, we all work a lot. Right now, work is also part of our home life, potentially still. It is for me. And so I want to make sure that we're creating a safe, successful, welcoming, exciting, energizing place to be when you come to work. So excited to hear what people think about who owns culture and who's responsible for it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction, Karen. Really appreciate it. And I really am looking forward to this conversation. I see everyone in the audience started to kick off their sharing their thoughts. Most people are saying everyone, but leaders should be taking the helm. I see everyone is responsible. All the people are keepers of the culture. Now, remember, guys, if you don't show who you are on LinkedIn and you're listed as private, you're just going to come up on the screen as a LinkedIn user. For some people, that may be okay. Um, but for the most, so I can't see who you are, so I can't call your name. But someone here is saying everyone is responsible. All the people are keepers of the culture. And then I see someone else saying, yes, leaders endorse the culture that exists, but what they do and what they don't do, they have signal setting action power as role models. Thank you. All
Love
right.
that.
I see Kimberly saying everyone plays a part in culture success. Awesome. So everyone's pretty much on the same page. We all believe as everyone, and we believe that leaders have a part to play in that as well. So let's hear your thoughts. Is HR solely responsible for organizational culture? According to our audience, no. What do you say?
I would agree with our audience. I think what people struggle with is that HR leaders and the HR team may have the expertise on how to execute against some of it. What does that mean from a rewards and recognition program? What should our performance reviews look like based on what our culture is or how our values should be reflected in the day to day lives? But we are not responsible for setting the strategy, what the culture should be. We can help facilitate it. We can partner with it. We can share our suggestions just like any other leader in the organization. But if it's only an HR thing, it feels like an HR thing. It feels disingenuous. It feels like it's actually not reflective of the whole organization. And just like someone said about the role model piece, think about companies that are known for poor cultures. They often say, "Oh, well, it's because the leadership team does this or certain managers behave this way." So they tie the culture to other people. They don't say HR is a mess usually. They tie it to other areas of the organization. So
Mm-hmm.
flip that on its head and say, so therefore those other folks must be responsible for creating a great culture as well.
Exactly. And I love how you put that spin in terms of HR being the facilitators of culture. Because I think a lot of times leaders do get this wrong. And sometimes employees get it wrong. Sometimes, like when you ask employees, like, what do you think culture is? And they go, oh, let's get some beer kegs,
Yes.
let's get a pool table, let's have a party. And we've got culture. All right. And culture is so much more than that. And also for leaders, understanding that, if they don't lead by example and they're not at the forefront of what we're trying to build as a culture in an organization, then from an HR purpose, it just seems like a tick the box exercise.
Yes.
It's not as genuine as it could be. Yeah.
Yeah. And people care a lot more. I mean, I think they've always cared, but they thought about it more as like, oh, I'm supposed to ask about the culture during an interview, or I'm going to reference it as a phrase that's more jargony than what I really understand. And now, after the last year and a half, where people's cultures were really put to the test, where companies either lived their values or they didn't, I think people now really understand that it is more than the beer cakes and the ping pong tables. It's how do we treat people? How do we communicate? How do we make decisions? How do we focus on success and support each other and treat each other as humans? That's what creates a culture, and that's what your values should be reflecting. And I think more and more people get that. And so if they don't see it, they may leave, or they're looking for it when they're doing their interview process with certain companies.
Yeah, I agree with that too, because we were having this conversation before when we were talking about different generations converging on the workforce. And I think if you think about Gen X, millennials, um, you recognize Gen Z. We all want different things, baby boomers. We all want different things, but we all want to belong.
Yes.
And we want to know what that feels like. And I think a lot of times you'll find persons now asking that question: what is your organizational culture? What, not just what it looks like, but what does it feel like?
Yes. Yeah, I actually just led a training last week with a group around organizational belonging and how that feels from a communication standpoint. And I think this is sort of the next phase of evolution when we have these conversations with our team members, is that it's not just about diversity or some of the more traditional check the box items when it comes to these conversations. It's actually about broader sense of belonging. My background and experiences, where I went to school, my political beliefs, do I feel safe in sharing things? Do I feel like that I as a whole person, all of the things that includes, I'm a pet parent, I'm a this, I'm a
Yeah.
that, all of that is what needs to be supported, not just
Mhm.
literally the diversity inclusion sort of topics that have been talked about more in the past.
I am so glad that you said that, because I mean, this is a conversation that is going to come up next week. Guys, wait till I tell you who's coming next week. But um, I remember listening to a podcast very recently with Brene Brown and our guest for next week. And she made a very important point where she said that people in an organization isn't safe until everyone feels safe.
Hmm.
And I
Yes.
thought that that was super powerful, because that's tied to your culture, right?
Yes.
Everything that you said just now. If people in the organization, if everyone in the organization doesn't feel safe, then you still have work to do where your
Mhm.
culture is concerned. And helping everyone to feel like they belong,
Yes.
right?
And it
So
should
how?
also,
Uh-huh. Sorry.
no, I was just gonna say real quick, it also should feel authentic to you. I think also sometimes companies feel like they need to look or behave like other companies because they're the ones that get the press or whatever. And yes,
Yeah.
they're probably getting coverage because they're doing some good things, but it should be right for you. And so even in all the companies I've worked for, our values and our culture, from Ordergroove to Yodel to AGI to a big consulting firm, like they've been different, and that's okay because it was right for that organization. There's some baseline stuff, right? Like treat people as humans and create safe spaces for people. That's some baseline stuff. But what that actually plays out in your organization, how you communicate and those things, that can be unique for you because it should fit for what your business is trying to do.
Exactly. So if you are really focused on what your strategy is as an organization and what your goals are and where you're going, then you're going to build your culture around that, instead of
Mhm.
trying to mimic other organizations and be like them.
Yes.
But like you said, there are some things that are fundamental and foundational, right? That are necessary. If we're not treating everyone like human beings, and we're not treating everyone like they have a brain in their head, and we've hired them to make a specific contribution, and we want to give them everything that they need in order to be successful in their role, then we're gonna continue to have problems with trying to build a great culture, right?
Yes. Well, and I think it also ties to within your culture, you may also have how that plays out differently for different departments or different locations. I've talked to organizations that may have line folks or production folks, and what's important to them may be different than their corporate employees. Or, when I worked at Yodel, we had a call center, a very big call center, and what was important to those folks was different than what were, the product and engineering teams in New York. And it doesn't mean that they didn't live the Yodel values, or it doesn't mean that there's not a culture that you're trying to represent through every organization. But this is where, again, the leadership really comes into play. Leaders know what's important to their teams. Like, what does your fulfillment team need and value, and how can we tie that to our culture? And then let's do that for them, and we'll do something else for someone else. And that's where the execution comes into play. Is the leaders should know their teams, and HR can help them think through what's best for their teams that fits under the broader umbrella of the organization.
Yeah, and you're now touching on that second question that we were about to talk about, which is, since HR is not solely responsible for culture, then what is HR's role, especially when it comes to culture transformations in the
Yeah.
organization? How do we get this done?
Yeah, I think this is where we can really partner with leaders, but also be open to listening and think creatively. So, what worked in one organization may not work in another, but there's some best practices that you bring. So, do you have an organization that is really computer savvy? And so maybe there are some things that you can do that are, Slack apps and those sort of things. But if that's not right for your company, don't try to force that and think
Yeah.
about things that might be better. I remember there's a company called Five Below, which is a retail store. And I saw them
Mhm.
speak at a conference about the way they built out their values for their team members. And they created these posters that people put in their lockers that were I statements. And so it really truly rang true for each individual about how they can live their values, but they put them as posters because that's what made sense for most of their team. So I think for HR, we can be there to help advise, help think through what is right, share things that we've seen work or not work in other organizations, and be that partner from the strategy, philosophy, sort of that level. And then we can help with the actual execution. And I want to make clear for my HR friends, I'm not saying that HR is just doers. Like, that is
Right.
not what I'm saying. We were part of creating the strategy, but
Mhm.
then we can bring our expertise to say, okay, so what does that actually look like for this organization? Let's do this for a recognition program. Let's do this for performance reviews. Let's make sure we're training our interview teams on what does it mean to do a culture interview so that you don't create biases and some of those things that we've talked about in the past. So those are places where our HR expertise then comes into play to bring all of this to life.
And then I also want to add to that in terms of our assisting and helping managers to facilitate conversations with employees on the
Yes.
ground. Because I think we're all in agreement that culture is everyone's business. And so while we're making recommendations, because that's what we do, we make recommendations, right? We don't always get people to support the recommendations, but if we're trying to make an inclusive culture where everyone is involved and having a say as we're going through the process, then we can help facilitate that as well, right?
Yes, that's a great, and I think especially new managers. So for folks that are newer to leading a team, whether they came from the outside and they just need to learn the culture in general, or especially if they were promoted from within and now they're managing their former peers, I think sometimes because we are all so busy, we lose track of those new managers and ways that we need to help coach them now be role models, now identify it within their teams, how to create it more within their teams now that they're the actual manager.
Yes. And I think Gail makes a really good point here. She says that she thinks that leaders need to know what culture is first,
Yes.
then promote it to the organization. And HR supports this strategy as everyone buys in and performs within the culture. Thank you so much for sharing that, Gail. Your thoughts on Gail's comment, Karen?
Yeah, it's a great point. I always try to say, think about HR just like every other functional department, right? So if you had a new finance person come in and they had to teach people how to look at a P&L, like bring your expertise to the table. So really make sure that there's alignment in what it means, alignment in an understanding, alignment what it then means for that organization,
Mm-hmm.
and then support it moving forward. But I think the education piece is a great point because especially if you haven't had HR there before, or it's a new leader and they may have worked with HR differently in the past, because we all know HR can be different things in different organizations still.
Yep.
Make sure you take the time to use same language and make sure you're all on the same page before moving forward, because then you're never going to be successful.
Definitely. I appreciate that. And I think that that makes total sense when it comes to how we communicate that across the board. And I see, again, I can't say, I'm sorry, Brianna, sorry, made a really good point. We are the change agents. We assist with brainstorming and assist with implementing the values. Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. I see, and this is why we end up in the comments, but it's important because this is not just our show, right? This is everyone's who's here has a say. So I see Linda saying it's important for leaders in an organization to remember that feeling safe is a lot more than being safe physically or safe from harassment.
Yes.
That's powerful.
I think sometimes people like to check the box to say, well, no one's being harassed here, or, OSHA's not going to come in and shut us down or whatever. Great. Like that's a good first step, but there's
Yeah.
so much more to that. It's almost like the belonging we talked about. Well, we're not discriminating people. Well, okay, well that's good. Like that's a really important first step, but it's so much more than that. So I think Linda makes a great call out there that, one roundtable I had with my management team at Ordergroove was around creating the space to have those kinds of safe conversations. And I use the word uncomfortable because sometimes for managers they are uncomfortable, but how are you? What's your stress level? Where's your burnout level? What's going on for you in life? 15, not even 10 years ago, I did manager training where the rule was if it starts to get personal, like stop the conversation because you don't want to go there because that's where it gets risky. That's not the
Mhm.
case anymore. Like we're talking to our team members like humans. We want to know what's going on in their life so that we can support them because they are a whole human, not just the work they're doing when they log into a Zoom or, go into an office anymore.
Exactly. I know that I was gonna say, lost my train of thought for a moment, but I was gonna say that as a parent, one of the things that I always thought about having children was I didn't want to be one of those goo goo gaga parents. I always wanted to be one of those parents where we spoke plain English. If the kids asked questions, we were able to give them answers. We wanted them to feel safe with asking questions. You want them to feel safe about coming to you about certain things. And if you think about it from an organizational perspective, that's exactly what you want from the people that you work with, right? You want them to feel safe enough to be able to share ideas, come to you with problems and possible solutions. And you want them to feel safe enough to be able to say, look, I don't think this is working.
Yes. Yes.
Here's why I don't think it's working. Here's what I think, my suggestion as to how we could make this better. And you want everyone across the board to feel safe enough to do that. And I think that comes with having a leadership that is open to it, having
Mhm.
HR that is open to that kind of environment, and then transcending that across the organization. So that feeling of psychological safety is
Yes.
100% paramount when it comes to creating a great culture. And I saw someone made a comment before about, when you think about culture, that is almost like we're talking about diversity and inclusion. And to your point, some of it is, but for the most part, we're more talking about not just belonging, but for people to feel psychologically safe.
Mhm.
So I think to the point of it's not just about diversity and inclusion, it's about psychological safety.
Yes.
And whenever we're talking about culture, we're talking about what are those things, whether common or uncommon to us as people in a group, trying to achieve a specific goal so that we're creating products and services that are great, that our customers are going to love, that they're going to buy, they're going to keep coming back. That cycle is reciprocal on the inside.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the shift a few years ago to employee experience, like user experience and customer experience,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that's really fair. At the end of the day, we are creating an organization where we hope people want to work. And to your point, if it's no longer the right place for them, let's have that open conversation. Because if there is something we can change, obviously we want to. But if not, we want everybody to leave being champions of the organization versus frustrated or burned out or feel like, they weren't heard, but it's
Yeah.
okay if it's no longer the place for you. People don't stay in organizations for 20 plus years with pensions like they used to. And so
Yeah.
that's okay. But we want to create the environment where you can be successful for as long as it makes sense. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think, it goes back to what someone said earlier about, role modeling as managers and leaders, what it means to be vulnerable. So if I'm telling you this is a safe space to have this conversation, I better reflect that as well. And so I'll tell you that this week was a really crappy week, or technology is getting me down, or I'm really burnt out and I cannot wait for the weekend. Or, hey, I see the team struggling with this. This is one idea I had. What do you think about it? Do you think that might help? What could I be doing differently as your manager and leader? Or what more do you need from me? Having that reflection point on your own is what's going to help actually create a safe space, because they'll say, oh, well, if they're willing to do it, then they really must mean it. It must be an authentic request.
Yes. Yes. I love that. That is so powerful. I'm respecting the power of the pause. I'm learning to do that with my ADHD brain. It's not, I'm not always successful, but I respect the power of the pause.
Yeah.
You know, when we talk about culture, there are so many other things that relate to culture and organizational culture. And recently, I'm reading a lot more about learning cultures, developing a
Mhm.
learning culture, and developing a coaching culture. And what do those things mean? Because they are completely different to, but still tie into how we create a great organizational culture.
Yeah.
So, what does it mean to have a learning culture?
Yeah, it's a great question. Another term that I've heard thrown out there is like a feedback culture.
Feedback culture, yeah.
Yeah. So for me, it represents a place where it's okay to try something and make a mistake, and it's not punitive. Now that doesn't mean there's not performance management. You don't have to hit expectations and goals and all that stuff. But if
Right.
you legitimately were trying to hit your goal, you tried something, it didn't work. Were you able to take that learning in, adjust quickly, try something else based on that, and avoid the same mistakes over and over again, or
Mhm,
avoid the same pitfalls, and
mhm.
creating the support system to do that. So whether that is, having ongoing feedback conversations, job shadowing, development opportunities from a more structured standpoint, or just on the job coaching. There's sales managers that literally will like listen in on sales calls to help salespeople learn on the spot
Yeah.
what to say, on a call. So I think anything that is supportive of realizing you're not perfect, realizing you don't have all the answers, and we want you to take risks and try things, even if it means you fail, because the only way
Mhm.
you learn is to do that. Now, again, doesn't mean you can't like not you do your job and not hit expectations,
Yep.
but that's the approach, and that's the first step towards it. That's the intent of it. And then obviously if it doesn't work out, that's other conversations. But for
Yeah.
me, that's what it means, is that we are trying to help you learn and grow. And the only way to do that is to allow you a little space to make some mistakes.
Absolutely. And I love this from the perspective of that you're trying to create a more agile culture. And in the space of an agile organization, you talk a lot about failing fast and moving
Mhm.
on, but feeling okay to fail, being able to learn through retrospective, being able to um, integrate with other members of the team that are going to
Mhm.
help you achieve your goal. So you're more cross collaborative. If you know that you need someone from legal to help you achieve your goal, someone from marketing to help you achieve something, you can all come together. You work on the project together. You give each other feedback. You put it out there and you test it. It's also about being able to test the
Yes.
power of experimentation and feeling free enough to test it. So then, when it comes to where HR and leaders can then take the charge in supporting that, is being the buffer when it comes to people trying to get work done, but they're being blocked.
Mhm.
How can we help remove those blockages so that you can continue to do what you're doing and be successful, meet your target, meet your deadline? Can we remove those for you? And how can we go about doing that? And we work on that in the background to support teams that want to grow. And then also giving people the opportunity to move from project to project.
Mhm.
That's all about learning and helping people to understand how every single piece in that organization works to make whatever it is that you're trying to make or
Yes.
achieve.
Well, and I love the way you just phrased that, because I think, especially coming from the tech startup world where I've spent most of my career,
Mhm.
I know times when people hear me speak, they're like, yeah, but we're this huge, massive, global, conservative, blah, blah, blah industry. We can't do that stuff. And I get that maybe you do it differently, but you can absolutely give feedback. You can absolutely help people learn. Maybe
Yes.
it's getting ahead of the latest compliance thing or something, or risk assessment, or I don't know, whatever thing that you're working on, and bringing that, proactively to your organization. And so it's a learning mindset, versus, literally agile scrum fail fast, whatever. Like I realize that looks different in different
Different.
organizations, but it's
Yeah.
the foundation of
Hmm.
support that is really
Yes.
where you can replicate it no matter your organization.
Exactly. And that's the point. It's like what we talked about before with culture. It's not, you can look at other companies as a case study to see what worked for them and what would work in your environment. It's not about taking it and just putting it completely in your environment. And the same thing is true with Agile, right? So you can take out the principles that apply to you, that you think would work for your team or work for your organization, and you can infiltrate those in different ways. But it's about being open to learn about it, to see what would work in your organization, to get the feedback from your teams, and then try your best to implement it and see if it works. And then because you're in a learning state, you go, okay, well, this doesn't work. This is why it doesn't work. This is, and I'm trying something else.
Yeah.
So you're always in that state of continuous development and continuous improvement. So we've talked about learning cultures. Let's talk about coaching cultures.
Yeah, I think for me, a coaching culture refers to the interaction between different people within the organization. Are you there to tell people what to do or help people learn what to do? So it's the whole
Mhm.
idea of like fishing for them or teaching them to fish or whatever that phrase
Yeah.
is.
Teach them
Um,
how to fish and they eat forever instead of give a man a fish. Yes.
Thank you. Yes. So, as managers, as HR people, are we there to help people learn and grow? Or are we literally there to tell them what to do? And personally, especially from an HR standpoint, I really see myself as a coach and advisor. Unless you are about to get us sued by doing what you're about to do, which is,
Yeah.
hopefully rare. I am here to give you some advice. I'm here to help you see the pros and cons of different decisions. I'm here to share what I've seen work in the past, talk through kind of the different
Hmm.
scenarios you're considering. But at the end of the day, you're an adult and you're going to do the decision that you think is right. And then I'll either help you deal with the consequences if that happens, or awesome, we learned something and what you tried actually worked. And for me,
Yeah.
that's more of a coaching culture. That's hard to say,
Yeah.
because I'm helping you think through it, not saying do this, don't do this, red flag, or whatever phrase people like to use.
Yeah. And I think that that's so important for people to understand, because I think even we ourselves as HR professionals from time to time get caught up in this is what you need to do.
Yeah.
This is how you should do it
Yeah.
versus, hmm, what do you think you're going to achieve when you do it this way? What is your intended outcome? How about if I like that idea, but how about if is a
Mhm.
completely different way of phrasing it than you're asking, getting the person to think a little differently. And you're bringing the person to a different answer, but you're still helping them to achieve what they want to achieve. I think it's important for people to understand, and for us, especially as HR, that we need to move to a more coaching mindset. We've lived in this space so long of being reactive, giving
Mhm.
people the answer, opposed to helping people to think for themselves and come to the answer. And I think the great thing about like us and having this conversation, Karen, is that we're both coaches.
Yes.
So we both have that experience of helping lead people to answers versus telling people what to do. What
Yeah.
are some of the experiences you've had as you coach leaders in your organization? If you think about how you previously led or you previously gave advice, because we've all come from that space, I think, at some point where
Mhm.
we told people what to do. But when you changed it to a coaching mindset, what was the difference that you recognized for yourself and for the people you worked with?
Yeah, I mean, so for the people I worked with, one of the biggest things was they felt ownership and also accountability if it was their decision or if they felt like it was their decision.
Yeah.
Um, versus, oh, well, HR said I couldn't do this or HR told me I had to do it this way. That's not a place any of us want to live. And so
No.
by helping them get to a decision, hopefully it's a decision that, we're really excited about as well, but they're walking away going, okay, this is my decision. I own it.
Mm-hmm.
I am accountable for it. And they're either really excited about it because they're like, yeah, I figured this out and they got to a really excited place, or they recognize that they're putting their foot on the line, or like they're going to fall on the
Mhm.
sword on this one if it doesn't end up working out. So I
Yeah.
really think that ownership and accountability was the biggest shift I saw versus the excuse of, well, HR told me to do it this way. And then I think for
Mhm.
me, it just makes my job way more interesting and way more enjoyable. If I'm
Yeah.
the police or the referee or the taskmaster, that's not a fun place to be, at least for me personally. So if I'm having a coaching conversation with someone and it's an actual dialogue, that's way more interesting. And by the way, I may not always be right. And so I
Yeah.
get to learn something potentially in that situation too.
And being in a space of developing yourself as a coach,
Yeah.
you have to be able to embrace that growth mindset, right? And I think someone mentioned it before about the importance of a growth mindset, and a coaching mindset is your way of developing yourself to a growth mindset,
Yeah.
because you're learning from the person that you're working with, and they're learning from you,
Yes.
and it helps them to be great leaders and helps them to then move on and be able to teach their employees how to be accountable for their work as well. Because I hear a lot of managers complain about, employees not taking accountability for themselves and for their jobs. But when they take on a coaching mindset as well, then it helps their employees then to feel more involved,
Mhm.
and take on the responsibility and own the task at hand and own the deliverables at hand. So I think that that's really important. I am loving these comments. I want to go back just a little bit because I don't want to miss the comments. They are very valuable. Someone is saying building culture requires having a growth mindset. Yes, I know I saw that somewhere. Thank you so much. In learning cultures, there is room for mistakes. Absolutely. And then someone else is saying it's about embracing the fail forward philosophy. I
Yes.
think that's
And
very important.
to kind of add to that a little bit too, both what you were just saying and what's coming through in
Mm-hmm.
the comments is that, you were talking about managers holding their teams accountable. Your role as a manager is now very different. You're accountable for different things. And these kinds of decision moments are one of the things you're accountable for. It's no longer, putting the data in Excel, but making sure your team is getting to the goals in which they're doing those things. So I think
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that as managers and leaders also leads to a stronger culture and more of a growth mindset, because you recognize your role is very different as a manager than it was as an individual contributor.
Definitely. And I think Brianna makes a really good point here. She says it's important to get feedback
Yes.
before your employees jump ship.
Yes. And
That's
by
a
the way, before they even give notice, like the minute they've made that emotional decision, they're gone. And if you save them, maybe it's a band-aid. It's rare when you've actually literally saved them, because by the time they've gotten to that point, they've emotionally moved on. So Brianna has a great point about doing these conversations earlier and learning along the way, because otherwise it's too
yeah,
late.
definitely. Thank you so much for sharing that, Brianna. I appreciate it. So go into our next question. What is your formula for a successful company culture?
Whew, that is a loaded question.
I know, I know.
Which is
I
why I love it.
I
Um,
saved
I
them for last.
um, so for me, it really ties to authenticity. What is right for your organization? And it's okay to say that, our organization is more siloed, or I don't want people to feel like there's wrong answers here outside, again, foundational stuff. Please treat people like humans and all those good things, but you should do what's right for your organization and then define your culture through your values. It's
Mhm.
very easy just to throw that culture word around. And if it
Wow.
doesn't have any real meaning and grounded in something,
Yeah.
it becomes the ping pong tables and beer carts or whatever. So figure out what you are as an organization today, and where do you want to go? And do those things still align, or is there a little bit of a gap and you need to start evolving as an organization? It could be natural because you're growing or something has changed with your organization, or it could be sort of right sizing where you want to be in the future, and using your values to help get you there. But then really use those values to define the culture. And it's common language. You're using it during the interview process. You're using it throughout the employee life cycle so that it feels very true
Yeah.
for you. And reference them. Like, I see people who have these great values and are actually behaving and such, but never reference it back. So, with Ordergroove, for example, when we during the height of COVID and we were going, we were leaving the office, which was for us very uncomfortable. We were very in office kind of culture.
Mm,
And we were then going to stay remote and all of those uncomfortable things for us. We talked about our values during our communication. So, what you see is what you get. So that's all about authenticity and the importance of our individual people. So we send people home early because your health is more important than anything else we're doing.
yeah,
But then we had to figure out how we were going to collaborate, which is one of our values. And then we talked about how we don't have the answers. And I have no idea what we're doing about COVID, or we have not done the best things in the past around really talking about diversity and inclusion during all the racial injustice conversations. So we showed
mhm,
transparency and vulnerability about those uncomfortable conversations. And the
mhm,
point of all that is like, we called it out when we talked about it. One of our values is X. This is one of those moments where we need to lean into that. This is part of our DNA. We're built for this. We're going to be okay because of this value. And I hope that that helped people recognize sort of, oh, we're going to get through this. Our culture and our values are the foundation that we'll use to get through these tough times. And so for
mhm.
me, I think that's the other sort of final part of the formula is it has to be authentic for you. You have to figure out what it means, and then you have to actually put it into action through values or something that's very tangible so your
Yeah,
employees will recognize it.
definitely. I think it's so important to move not just from a state of insight, but to a state of action.
Yes.
So you can't just talk about it, you definitely have to be about it. And if you're
Yes.
not about it, then you have to give people the opportunity to call you out on it and say, well, you said you were going to do this, we never saw it happen, and be okay with being called out on it.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And I think that it's also really important for people to recognize that as we talk about culture, we understand we're talking about company culture, which means you should know your company.
Yes.
If you don't
Yes.
know your company, how do you create a culture in the first place, right? And
Yes.
to your point, I think that it's really important that as you tie all those pieces together, you start with know your company, understand your values, how you're going to live those and be about it, and how
Yes.
you're going to be okay with people calling you out when you're not about it.
Yeah, if we're creating a learning culture, a feedback culture, a place of vulnerability, I better also be role modeling that. And so,
Exactly.
talking about agility, we try things in small sort of pilots or tests first to get some feedback, and hopefully people believe me when I say, and if it doesn't work, I get it. We'll try something else, but give me the feedback. I'm just trying something new based on feedback I've gotten in the past. And I hope people feel safe telling me, hey, that was off mark, or hey, you really kind of missed the boat on that one. And
Mhm.
hopefully they hear me say, oh, shoot, you're right. Yeah, no, that was not good. Thank you for that feedback. Let me try something different.
Absolutely. Who would you say is one person or several people who you have learned from that have made you better at what you do and made you think differently about organizational culture?
Yeah, I think my biggest learnings come from my HR startup peers. I mean, there's always the greats that we all love and
Mhm.
adore and read all their books and all those sort of good
Mhm.
things. But to be honest, the people that I connect the most with are the people that are in my network who are in similar boats that I'm in, and they do some really creative things.
Yeah.
Um, this is not a company that reflects us, but I was recently talking to a HR leader at T-Mobile, and they did the coolest thing when they first went remote about how to incorporate the kids of the parents at T-Mobile. And they talked about your new employee, and they literally did like onboarding for the kids. So they got badges, and because they wanted families to feel like everybody was welcome. We know you're working in these ridiculous
Yeah.
settings. So again, that's not one of my like literal networking peers because we're a
Yeah.
startup, but that concept, I was like, that is so cool. I love it. So
Mhm.
that's where I get my inspiration as an HR leader is what are
Yeah.
other organizations doing that's really creative and different, and how can I
Mhm.
steal that and think about it for Order
Yes,
Groove?
exactly. And kind of maneuver it so that it works for you.
Yeah.
Definitely. I think that's really important. And that's really good advice because I do the same thing. Like I read a lot. So I'm
Yeah.
always looking at what other organizations are doing so that when I go to the table to have conversations or even advise my clients, because I work with HR professionals every day, to say, this is what I, here's some research that I found surrounding a particular problem that you're having, whether it's a leadership problem or an employee issue, or you're looking at a different way of implementing or putting together a people strategy. These are some of the things that some of the other companies and great HR professionals are doing. Sometimes I even go to my network because my
Yeah.
network is so big, and I go, sometimes I love to go on Twitter and just ask my HR community on Twitter. You guys are awesome. If there's anyone who is not following me on Twitter or a part of the hashtag HR community on Twitter and you have a Twitter account, fix that right now. Because the HR community on Twitter is absolutely amazing. You can ask anything. Someone is going to come with an answer. They're going to come with a case. They're going to come with some link, something to help you either answer the question or come to an answer or come to a discovery. It's important to recognize that as you build culture, you're not alone.
Yes.
You're not alone in doing that. As you start to think about ideas of how you can improve and how you can support and how you can move change along, always reach out to community and be sure that you build a community where people of HR professionals and even outside, because I've learned a lot from people who are not in HR. I've
Hmm.
learned a lot from employees in other organizations who have had great experiences, just sharing that I've been able to use or implement in some way. So always look outside. The answer is not, doesn't have to be, and is not always in you
Yes.
until it's brought out, right?
Yeah, and I think, we mentioned this earlier in the conversation. I think HR folks tend to put that on ourselves. We think we have to have the answers, and we don't. We really don't. We
So,
don't expect everyone else in the organization to have all the answers.
mm-hmm,
So, whether to your point, that's employees, especially if they're new hires and they just came from an organization, like what was one thing their last organization did really well? Maybe that's some new idea that we could consider. But I would not have survived the last year and a half if it wasn't for my HR network. We were all dealing with stuff we had never dealt with before. And I
exactly.
needed friends to help me figure out what the heck we were doing.
Absolutely. I could not have done it without them either. So, to your point, HR community is everything. So, if you're not
Yeah.
building your communities, then you need to start building your communities. Every single person on this call today, on this live today, connect with every single person on this live today. Make sure you connect with Karen, make sure you connect with me, and then build your community and be intentional about it. We want to help you and we want to support you. We are here. That's
Yeah.
why we're here. So reach out.
Yes.
Oh, someone, oh, Michaela said it's National Talent Acquisition Day. I didn't know that. Happy
Ah,
National Talent Acquisition Day, people.
I love that.
This is what happens in this space. I want to pick up on something that Gail said, and just go back a little bit as we start to wrap up. But she was
Mm.
saying that accountability is important. And this is something about, well, I guess she can only phrase it to the Caribbean, but I think it's global. But in the Caribbean, we let things slide a lot. We offer feedback underground. How does that help the employee grow? Good question. How does that support a positive work environment as part of the culture? What is your answer to this, Karen?
Yes. I am not as uh up on the specific Caribbean culture, but I do agree it happens elsewhere as well. And I think sometimes it's interesting. I either see it happen for two different reasons. One, the person does okay enough, and they're trying, so you feel bad about like doing more severe performance management because they're not being a jerk. They're trying. They're doing okay, but they're not doing as great as you need them to. So it's really gray on how you're going to give the feedback, or that's how the manager feels. And then sometimes I think too, we're trying to move so fast and do too much. At least it's somebody, and I'm afraid if I don't have at least somebody, that empty
Mm,
seat is more harmful, for lack of a better phrase, than the person that's
yeah.
just doing okay. And so I think when I work with managers, I try to help them think through a couple of different scenarios. First of all, to Gail's point, like is it actually impacting others in the sense of they think this is okay? So does that reflect something about your culture and your organizations that is not fair and actually
Yeah.
is not accurate? So there's, sort of the external view of what's happening. But I think on the flip side, it's also not fair to that person. Like, everybody wants to be successful. There are very few people in this world that don't want to feel success. Now, success may feel different to them, but people want to do a good job. They want to know that they're doing the right things. And so
Yeah.
by either not giving the feedback or not escalating the feedback, it's actually not fair and respectful to the person either. And
Hmm.
then the final thing I'll tell managers, and it's hard for them to hear this in the moment, but they almost always agree with me after the fact if the person has moved on, is you do not realize how taxing it is when you have someone that is not doing their best or not giving you what you need on a team. You're spending a lot more time with that person than you realize. You're using a lot more like brain trust trying
Yeah.
to either work around them or try to get them better. And it's actually better for everyone, including the manager, and your bandwidth and your ability to hit your goals. If you're honest with someone and say, I want to work with you. Like, let's put a performance improvement plan, or let's like give them a chance. But at the end of those 30 days, if we're not at the point we need to be, this may not, it's not the right place anymore. And it's really actually better for everyone. It doesn't feel like that in the moment, but it actually is
Yeah.
better for everyone to make that tough call when the time is appropriate.
Definitely. And to your point, I think that goes back to like what we were talking about before when it comes to creating a great culture. That employee experience starts from the recruitment process. The candidate experience matters. That like the employee's journey through the organization. And if you have to get to the point where you have to have that critical, difficult conversation about maybe this isn't the right place for you, maybe this job isn't the
Yeah.
right job for you. But how do we move this forward, and how can we do it in such a way that's respectful to both
Mhm.
of us transitioning out? That also is what makes a great culture,
Yes.
that you're able to have that conversation and share space with that person in an open and honest way, and an authentic way that lets that person know in their mind, did I really give my best?
Mhm.
And if the answer is no, then shoot, let me hold space for that, and let me take my licks for that.
Mhm.
Uh, but then how do we move this forward? Is this really where I want to be? Maybe not.
Yeah.
But then how do I move forward from here, and to have a leader that's willing to help you transition that
Yes.
way with the support of HR? That's golden.
Well, and I think too, talking about knowing and talking and being able to communicate and understand your culture in terms that everyone understands. I'm
Mm-hmm.
also a big fan of, if someone is struggling in one role, but they represent your values and they represent your culture, I'm more than happy to try to help you find another role in our organization,
Organization.
because you're just
Yeah.
in the wrong role.
Yeah.
But you have to be representing our values and all that. But if you don't even know what that means, how can I help you? How can I identify if you're the right team member and just in the wrong role? So I think
Yeah.
that goes back to us in the leadership team around making sure we're able to define and people understand what we value in the organization. So if we do have the opportunity to move someone, everybody understands why, and it makes sense for everyone that was just a skill set issue, not a broader team issue.
Definitely. Definitely. And that's what culture is all about.
Yeah.
Being able to have those open, honest conversations in a respectful way that
Yes.
everyone feels like they left it with dignity and respect, right?
Yes. Yes.
For those of HR in the HR space who may be struggling to get buy-in from leadership on, how we make changes to the company culture, or why it's important to make changes to the company culture, what recommendations would you give for them to, articulate that conversation and move forward?
Yeah, there's two different things that I usually try to help people understand is, one, put it in terms that the business leader will understand. So, what is their biggest pain point? Is it, hitting revenue? Is it external brand? Is it speed to market, or, whatever the things are that they care about? help them understand how the right culture helps them achieve those goals in the timeline that they have. And that goes back to the last few years of talking about, HR understanding the business and all that stuff that, we all talk about in
Yeah.
previous conversations.
Hmm.
But figure out what's important to them and then tie it to them. We're all human, right? Like, if what's in it for me, it's true.
Exactly.
So help them figure out what's in it for them. I
Correct.
think on the flip side, again, depending on your culture, there is also this really hard truth right now. The great resignation wave is real, and most people leave managers and companies because they don't feel like they are supported, welcome, belong, so, ability to achieve all of those things, which are all tied to culture. So
Hmm.
do you want to be ahead of that and retain amazing people because you've built an amazing culture? Or do you want to constantly be backfilling people because they're leaving because they don't think the organization is a good fit for them? So, I don't like the stick approach, but if that works too, that is absolutely a truth that is out there.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that to those 2 points, really very insightful and very important points for people to think about as they think about having that conversation on why we need to change our organizational culture. Gail said you answered her question she said, great answer, Karen.
Yay.
So I think she was very happy with your answer to her question. Let's go into final comments and recommendations. Any final comments around creating great organizational cultures, where HR's lane is? How do we stay in it? How do we maintain positive relationships as we transition to having great learning, feedback, coaching cultures in our organization? A great culture that ties in all of those things.
Yeah, I think for my HR friends, just remember you do not have to do it all. I think sometimes it's our personality to feel like we're supposed to step in and like try to make everything great, and it's not. And it actually hurts us when we try to do it all and we become that HR person. So
Mm,
use the partners in the organization just like you want them to use you and your expertise. Use them as your peers in the organization to create a great culture overall, and then just figure out what that culture is for you. And my final recommendation is what we were talking about earlier. Let's connect if we're not. I love, obviously, talking about this stuff, and happy to chat with anyone because we can only learn from each other and what we're all trying to do in our own organization. So build that network if you don't have it today, and then leverage it through Julie's amazing network, connecting with me, whoever you want to talk to. But let's talk to each other because I think we'll learn a lot from each other.
definitely. Karen Weeks, thank you so much for your
Thank
time,
you.
your energy, your wisdom in this conversation today. I so appreciate you for saying yes and just being you and being such a good friend and
Thank
us
you.
having these conversations. I see the comments coming through again. Um, Michaela says, yes, yes, yes. We definitely can learn from each other, and that's what Magnifying HR Voices is all about. And it's not about talking to all the people who we normally hear, but it's just hearing different voices and different perspectives and sharing thoughts that are important to helping us be better HR professionals. I want to say thank you to all of you for joining me today. I want to just give you a little flavor of what we have coming up next week. So, if you are in the HR space, if you're in the DEI space, if you're in the DEI space, calling all DEI people, if you're exposed to DEI, this conversation you do not want to miss. I feel like by having this guest on, I'm one step closer to getting to Brené Brown. Just putting that out there, Brené Brown. You can hear me. Have you ever been told as a person in DEI that you were a token hire? Have you ever been told as an HR person that you were a token hire? Who told you that? Why did they tell you that? How did it make you feel? How dare they? We are going to have a great conversation next week with Aiko Bethia is in the house. We will be talking about inclusivity in HR and beyond. We're going to tackle some topics that we don't necessarily talk about. One of them, very close to my heart right now, with regards to body shaming in the workplace, especially fat shaming. And Aiko and I are going to have that conversation on Wednesday next week. Same time, same channel. Do you want to be a part of the conversation? I know you do. I know you do. You just haven't said it yet. Reach out to me. Send me a message. DM me. I live on LinkedIn. The minute you message me, I get it. Let me know what you want to talk about. Let's have a conversation. If you have something that you think from an HR perspective has not been touched before that you really think we need to talk about, I am all about having those conversations. So let me know. And lastly, do you have your copy of Confessions of an HR Pro, Stories of Defeat and Triumph? It is my book. It is our book because it's the story of HR, and it's about all the things that we don't necessarily talk about as HR professionals, but we're feeling and we're experiencing. And I really think that it's important for you guys to be able to have this outlet. I've started the ball rolling. I will continue the ball. Join the conversation. Purchase Confessions of an HR Pro. It is available on Amazon in paperback and also in Kindle version. And I have a surprise for you guys next week. So stay tuned. Join me next week. That's it for this week. Thank you so much for being here. Once again, I am Julie Turney. This is Magnifying HR Voices, and I will see you on the other side next week.